suspect that Streeting could demand the Prime Minister's resignation in the days after the budget. Are you going to rule that out?
Yes, elected leader of the Labour Party. I didn't vote for him in the leadership election, but I did.
Imagine spending months, maybe years, carefully positioning yourself as the loyal lieutenant, the faithful number two, the guy who'd never dream of challenging the boss. And then your mates in Parliament start briefing journalists that you're basically Prime Minister in waiting, and they want to crown you king without even bothering with a proper election. Awkward doesn't even begin to cover it. Welcome to the world of Wes Streeting, Health Secretary, NHS reformer, and according to his parliamentary allies, the man who could replace Keir Starmer after one brutal night next May. This is UK Political Insight, and today we're diving into the Westminster rumor mill's latest masterpiece. But before we proceed, please don't forget to hit the subscribe button for more updates on this channel. Thank you. The alleged plot to install Wes Streeting as Prime Minister through a Gordon Brown-style coronation. Buckle up, because this one's juicy. Right, so let's set the scene. Keir Starmer's government is not exactly having a stellar run at the moment. The winter fuel allowance cut went down like a lead balloon. The grooming gang's response has been criticized left, right, and center. Benefit cuts are causing uproar, and then there's the small matter of next May's local elections, which seasoned political observers are predicting will be an absolute bloodbath for Labour. Councils could fall like dominoes. Safe seats might not be so safe anymore. And when that happens, when the electorate gives you a proper kicking at the ballot box, that's when the knives come out in Westminster. History tells us that much. So against this backdrop of impending electoral doom, reports have emerged that Wes Streeting's allies, his supporters in Parliament, are allegedly plotting a coup. Not just any coup, though, a Gordon Brown-style coronation, where Streeting would be installed as Prime Minister without having to face a proper leadership contest involving party members. Just slide him into number 10. Job done. Crisis averted. At least that's the plan according to anonymous MPs who've been briefing journalists like their political lives depend on it. One MP laid out the strategy pretty clearly. They said the party can't afford to lurch radically to the left and abandon the manifesto that won them a landslide last year. Why? Because they wouldn't have a mandate for such a massive change of direction. So instead, they need someone from a similar tradition as Keir who can say they'll stick to the manifesto. That way, they can resist the inevitable calls for a general election that would come if they ditched Starmer. The logic is actually quite clever if you think about it. Change the leader, but keep the policies roughly the same, and you can argue to the country that you're still delivering on what people voted for in 2024. It's political gymnastics of the highest order. This anonymous MP went on to say that changing leader in massively altering policies, as people like Angela seem to want, would undermine the platform they all stood on. So it needs to be a coronation. Oof. That's a direct shot at Angela Rayner right there, suggesting she's one of the voices pushing for a more radical left-wing shift. The factional warfare within Labour is barely even disguised at this point. Another MP told The Times that Wes is the best option to bring the party together. And here's where it gets interesting. They said it's not about what he'd do differently to Keir because the agendas would be quite similar. It's about what he wouldn't do. He wouldn't have done winter fuel cuts. He would have reacted quicker to grooming gangs. He would have handled benefit cuts better. That's absolutely brutal when you stop and think about it. They're not saying Wes would revolutionize policy. They're saying he'd have better political instincts and wouldn't have made the catastrophic, unforced errors that Starmer's made. That's damning with faint praise taken to a whole new level. Now here's where the plot thickens even more. This latest wave of briefings about Wes Streeting replacing Starmer comes hot on the heels of a brutal briefing war against Streeting by Downing Street and allies of the Prime Minister. Just last week, Number 10 was apparently leaking stories designed to kneecap Streeting, and they made it crystal clear that Keir Starmer would not go quietly if anyone tried to oust him. So you've got Team Starmer briefing against Streeting, then Team Streeting's mates briefing back saying, actually, yeah, we do want him as PM. It's like watching a slow-motion car crash where everyone's texting each other furiously as they hurtle toward the barrier. One minister pointed out the massive own goal Number 10 scored with their anti-Streeting briefings. They said it's a problem of Number 10's own making. By briefing against Wes and saying Keir would fight any leadership challenge, they forced colleagues to reconcile themselves with a question they'd been ducking up until that point. In other words, Downing Street accidentally started a conversation about whether Starmer should be replaced by trying to shut down that exact conversation. Political genius. Absolute four-dimensional chess. This minister went on to say the hard left just wants to look inward and have endless debates within the party about who should come next. But with Wes, he's got the judgment and political appetite to get stuck into the issues most affecting the country. So now we've got pro-Streeting MPs positioning him as the serious candidate who cares about voters as opposed to the left-wing ideologues who just want internal party warfare. Wes Streeting was apparently among the cabinet ministers identified as potential conspirators against the PM, with fears in number 10 that Starmer could face some kind of challenge following the budget on the 26th of November. That budget, by the way, is shaping up to be politically toxic. Tax rises, spending cuts, breaking manifesto pledges, it's the perfect storm for a government that's already struggling in the polls. And if it goes as badly as people expect, that's when the vultures will circle. Multiple cabinet ministers, including Streeting himself, said that whoever was behind the anti-Streeting briefings should lose their jobs, which is a pretty clear signal that even if there's no formal plot, there's definitely tension at the highest levels of government. When cabinet ministers are publicly demanding that number 10 aides get sacked, you know things are going badly behind the scenes. Now, Wes Streeting's spokesman has issued a statement trying to shut all this down. They said these anonymous sources don't speak for Wes. Then they rattled off a list of his achievements since the briefings against him. Another cut in waiting lists, more appointments during strike action than ever before, launching the country's first ever men's health strategy to tackle suicide, freezing prescription charges. The message is clear. Wes is totally focused on rebuilding the NHS, not on plotting coups. But here's the thing. That's exactly what someone plotting a coup would say, isn't it? You're hardly going to come out and admit, yeah, actually I do fancy being PM and my mates are working on it right now. Political ambition doesn't work like that. Let's talk about the Gordon Brown coronation comparison because it's absolutely key to understanding what's allegedly being plotted here. Back in 2007, Tony Blair finally stepped aside after years of internal warfare, and Gordon Brown slid into number 10 without facing a proper leadership contest. Labour MPs essentially stitched up the process so that Brown didn't have to face party members in an election. The problem? Brown never won his own mandate from the electorate. He inherited Blair's majority, then spectacularly lost the 2010 election. The lesson? Coronations can work in the short term, but they're politically risky. Voters don't like feeling like they've been denied a say. If Streeting's allies are really planning something similar, they're banking on being able to argue that keeping the manifesto intact means they don't need a general election. But that's a tough sell. The manifesto was Keir Starmer's manifesto. He was the face of the campaign. If you swap him out for someone else, even someone with similar politics, you're fundamentally changing what voters thought they were getting. And in a democracy, that's dodgy ground. There's also the question of whether Streeting actually wants this. Political ambition is a strange beast. Every politician with half a brain wants to be prime minister, but there's a difference between wanting it and actively plotting for it. Streeting's built his reputation as a competent, media-savvy minister who's willing to take on tough issues like NHS reform. He's popular with the public, relatively speaking, and he's managed to position himself as one of the few cabinet ministers who seems to know what he's doing. But does he want to inherit a sinking ship? Because let's be honest, if Starmer goes, whoever replaces him is walking into an absolute nightmare. Polls in the toilet, local election losses, a hostile media, and a conservative party that'll be screaming for a general election. Not exactly a dream gig. The timing of all this is fascinating too. We're talking about May's local elections as the potential trigger point. Local elections don't bring down prime ministers very often, but they can create the political conditions for a leadership challenge. If Labour loses hundreds of council seats, if they get battered in previously safe areas, the panic will set in. MPs will start worrying about their own seats, and when MPs start panicking, that's when leadership challenges become viable. The briefings we're seeing now might just be positioning, getting the idea of Streeting as a replacement into people's heads so that when the time comes, it feels inevitable rather than shocking. But here's the really interesting bit. These MPs briefing about this are explicitly saying they want to avoid the party lurching to the left. That tells you the real battle isn't just about replacing Starmer, it's about what kind of Labour Party emerges from this mess. The left wing of the party, people around Angela Rayner and others, might see Starmer's potential downfall as an opportunity to pull the party back toward more radical policies. The centrists and moderates, Streeting's camp, want to prevent that at all costs. So this isn't just about personalities, it's about ideology and the future direction of the Labour Party. Classic Westminster intrigue. And you've got to feel a bit sorry for Keir Starmer in all this. Well, maybe not that sorry. He won a massive majority just over a year ago. Labour were supposed to be in power for a decade. And now he's facing briefings from his own cabinet about potential replacements before he's even made it through his first full year as PM. That's got to sting. But then again, he's made serious mistakes. The winter fuel cut was politically tone-deaf. The grooming gang's response was slow and inadequate. The benefit cuts have alienated traditional Labour voters. If your own MPs are briefing against you, maybe you need to take a long, hard look in the mirror.